1983 was the midst of the Cold War between the Soviet Union and the United States of America. It was a time where there was no actual warfare, no boots on the ground or soldiers fighting, but there was this mental game being played between the two countries. There were threats and there was knowledge that each country had enough nuclear weapons to completely decimate the other country. In this time of the Cold War, everybody was just on edge. There was just this tangible tension that really never left. There were nuclear bomb drills in the United States, probably similar in the Soviet Union. Even kids were aware of the situation. But again, nobody was dying. No one was being shipped off to war. No sons or fathers or brothers, or nobody was being sent out. And so no one really saw the effects, but they felt them. They felt that dread, that constant fear that tonight might be the last night of normalcy, or tonight might be the last night that we're alive. So that makes this story so much more fascinating, because in the lens of this constant fear and paranoia and tension, listening to your instinct is just so much harder. When we as humans are under stress, we like order, we like direction, we like being told, when this happens, you do this. It's just simple human nature. And so this story just blew my mind. I can't believe I am just hearing about this now. I can't believe this isn't taught in textbooks. It feels like one of the most important nights and moments in recent history. To be honest, the world probably wouldn't exist as we know it today had anything gone differently on this night. So it's September 26th, 1983. And Stanislav Petrov, who is a Soviet Union soldier and a technician who was familiar with the technology at the time, especially the nuclear radar detection systems, was going to his night shift. And Stanislav, from what we know, he was a social guy. So he actually preferred the day shift. There were more people around. He didn't really have to be isolated, but this was the night where he had to work the solo night shift. And essentially, his only job was to make sure that the radar was clean and there were no incoming ballistics. And if there were, to immediately radio in and report it to whoever, his generals and the people in charge. At this point, as we've established, there was this idea of the Soviet Union having enough nuclear weapons to completely destroy the United States, and vice versa, the United States having enough nuclear weapons to completely destroy the Soviet Union. So there was an idea called mutually assured destruction. Each country knew, if you fire a nuke at us, we have the power to fire back and destroy you. So the only thing stopping the attack on one another was the idea that there was zero doubt that both countries would just end up decimated, and more than both countries, really the world would end up decimated. That was the only thing stopping nuclear war for this long stretch of time. As Stanislav is going into his night shift, it's about, it's a little after midnight. He's saying goodbye to his friends that work during the day. They're heading out, and they're in this bunker on the outskirts of Moscow. It's, freezing cold, snowing that day. He walks in, takes off his jacket. He's met with the familiar concrete, cold bunker, and he's all alone. Lights are dim. Basically everything you'd picture about what a nuclear bunker might look like in the Soviet Union in the 1980s, like that's what this looked like. So Stanislav's down there, and for the first hour, nothing happens. There's nothing special. He's just doing his thing. And he's looking at the radar, and There's no blips. There's nothing. There's zero concern. So, he's a good soldier. He's staying on top of it, but all he feels is that same sense of duty and, this is my day to day. This is what I'm doing tonight. I don't have anyone to chat with. I'm just hanging out. So he's sitting there, probably flipping through a newspaper, reading a book, whatever. And a little after 1 a.m, a blip comes across the radar. Just one single blip. And Stanislav's stomach drops. And it's not a fight or flight panic response, but it's almost like time just slows down around him, and every action he makes is in slow motion, and he can think way faster than everything that's going on, and he can process things in double speed. It's one of those moments where if you've ever felt like this might be the end, everything just slows down, and there's this strange sense of calm mixed with fear. It's a lot of cognitive dissonance. It's very hard to pin down unless you've experienced it. But Stanislav sees this blip come across the radar, and he knows that the radar is telling him that the United States just shot a nuclear weapon at the Soviet Union. And so the first thing he does is double check to make sure there's nothing going wrong. He, clicks around, he messes around with the radar, he looks on different views. Every view shows that there is one nuclear missile sent from the United States heading to the Soviet Union. And he's just sitting there alone in the middle of the night in this dark, cold room. Like, is this it? Is the world's about to end? This is it. I make one call and the world's about to end. Remember, mutually assured destruction. It's not just them. It's both countries and the whole world. So he sits there for a minute and he says to himself, something doesn't feel right. He can't really put his finger on it, but something feels wrong. And then it occurs to him, if the United States was trying to start a nuclear war and was going to decimate the Soviet Union, why would they only send one missile? Nuclear bombs are huge. They're huge bombs, but one isn't enough to decimate a country, especially as big as the Soviet Union. It's sometimes today the way we think about nuclear weapons is that one bomb is enough to just completely blow up the planet. And that's not necessarily true. That's not how it worked, especially back then, as technology hadn't really caught up. So Stanislav knew that if the United States were planning on fully attacking the Soviet Union, that they themselves, the United States, knew that they were going to be met with fierce, full retribution, which meant the Soviet Union's entire arsenal of nuclear weapons. And he also knew that the United States was aware of this. He knew that there was no chance of one rogue nuclear bomb being sent to target a specific area. This wasn't like a drone strike situation or something like that. It was all or nothing. This is the biggest stakes you can imagine. It's either we all live or we all don't. And so Stanislav just has this feeling like something isn't adding up here. Why would they only send one missile? So he's sitting there and he kind of catches his breath and gets a hold of himself. And he decides, remember, his job is to stare at the radar. And if there's a blip, if there's a missile, call it up, talk to the superiors. And he decides against it. And he goes, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait a little bit. And if anything more comes in, I'll call it up. And the world as we know it will end. That's a fair compromise between himself and his morality in the moment. And he doesn't think too much of the repercussions of waiting a few extra minutes to make sure that this is really truthfully what the radar is telling him. He does, however, radio some of the other Soviet Union soldiers that are around him, and he lets them know what's going on. So within a few minutes, 3 or 4 guys that, he knows well come down into the bunker, and he shows them the radar. And they're all going through their own internal panic. Like, Stanislav, what are we doing here, dude? Like, did you call it in? This is it. You know what I'm saying? This is it. Like, did you call it in? And he's like, nah, something just doesn't feel right. And they're like, Stanislav, what? This is not the time for you to be like, something doesn't feel right. Your orders are super strict. You see a blip on the radar, you call it in. That's it. It's a very simple job. It's not something that you have to think about. Your job isn't to think or make a decision. You literally are here to look at the radar and then call it in if anything happens. And they're adamant. They're pushing him. They're like, what are we like, what are you doing, dude? Like, you have to call it in. And he's, again, just listening to his instinct. And he's saying, something's just off. Why would they send one missile? I gotta wait, guys. I have to wait. I gotta see this through. One missile doesn't make sense. One missile doesn't make sense. Something doesn't feel right. And so he waits a little bit. He tells the other soldiers, his friends, he says, if there's any more activity, I'll call it in. We'll have more than enough time. Everything won't be all right, but we'll be okay. We will have done our job. And it's his call. It's Stanislav's call. He's the one on duty. He's in charge. So the rest of the guys fall in line and are like, all right, dude, we're not going to like back you up. Like, we don't support this decision at all, but it's your call. And so they're all waiting, and a few more people, get radioed in. And so the bunker's starting to fill up. It's starting to get packed, and everyone's looking at this radar screen like there's a nuke coming, like the world is about to end, basically. And a few minutes later, 4 more blips come across the radar. And so now everyone's looking at Stanislav like, dude, seriously? Like, why did you wait? This is obviously an attack. The U.S. is attacking us. It's over. Like, the world's over. They did it. They pulled the trigger. We're going to, it's over. And Stanislav still feels like something's off. At this point, they're flipping out. They're like, what are you doing? Like, no one cares about how you feel. No one cares about this or that. Like, no, you're not a philosopher. This isn't your job. Your job is literally just to report this. And if you don't do it, I'm going to do it. That's what some people are starting to say. If you don't report this, I'm going to just report it, because we're about to get nuked. Like, literally, we are about to get hit with nuclear weapons. It's obvious the U.S.'s intentions. There's 5 missiles coming at us. And Stanislav's like, yeah, but 5 isn't 1,000. Like the Soviet Union and the United States each have thousands of nuclear warheads. That if one country were to attack the other, they would send all of their nuclear weapons. It wouldn't just be 4 or 5. And so he's making this point, and he's trying to calm the other soldiers and the guys down. They're not having it. They're kind of, all over the emotional spectrum. And he's like, I got to trust my instinct. And he's so steadfast in this, which just makes this so fascinating, because he's disobeying orders in Soviet Russia. So he's not doing the status quo. And the only reason that we're here, arguably, is because he didn't follow orders. He listened to his intuition. He said, something feels off. I'm not going to do what I'm supposed to do right now. And this is some serious stuff. This isn't just something feels off. I'm not going to eat this food that, mom made. No, this is like, he's in a very particular position where his job is to monitor the nuclear radar and let the higher ups know that a nuclear missile is inbound for the Soviet Union. And he still decides, I'm not going to do it. It's not going to be me. Not at this time. It doesn't make sense. And so he convinces the other guys. He's like, everyone just calm down. I'm going to wait. It's on me. This is on me. It's my call. It's on me. I take full responsibility, but I'm going to wait for another confirmation. I'm going to wait for ground control, the people on the ground with their, their technology. I'm going to wait until they can see it with their eyes, and then I'm going to call it up. We're all good. We can nuke them. They nuke us. The world's going to end. Great. That's the plan. He knows that he needs to wait. He can't get himself to do it without a second confirmation, something that isn't from the radar. So he waits for ground control, the other soldiers that are looking out over the horizon to look for these missiles. At some point, you see them in the air. So he just waits for a visual confirmation. And 2 minutes go by, there's nothing. 2 more minutes, nothing. 5 minutes go by, the soldiers are starting to freak out. There's still nothing. And on the radar, they see that the missiles are starting to come into the area where the ground control would be able to make visual contact with them. And so they're all on their radios waiting to hear what they now fully and wholeheartedly believe, everyone but Stanislav, that there's nuclear missiles inbound. And they're just waiting for that visual confirmation. And it never comes. And it turns out Stanislav is right about the whole thing. There was a malfunction with the radar. The way that the sun was bouncing off the clouds essentially triggered the radar when there was no nuclear weapon inbound. And Stanislav's words that I can't unhear, he said in an interview after, was that I'm not going to be responsible for the end of the world. And so take that how you will. I don't know if him not following orders is a good thing, a bad thing, if he was morally right or wrong. I think it invites all of these questions, but it's just fascinating that because of this one man listening to his intuition and not following orders, our world is the way it is today. Because had he called those bombs up, Russia wasn't waiting. The Soviet Union wasn't waiting. This was a retaliatory strike situation. This is the Cold War. Remember in the beginning, kids are doing nuclear drills, hiding under their desks. People are freaked out. The Soviet Union especially, the leaders were certain that the United States was going to bomb them. They were certain that, and the United States was adding to this paranoia. They were like at one point doing military exercises where they would fly 12 jets that were capable of holding nuclear bombs. Here's the Soviet Union's airspace. They would fly 12 jets as fast as possible as if they were heading straight into the airspace. And then at the last second, all of the jets would just veer off and come back home. Why are they doing that? It was all just to kind of play with their minds and get people to feel that tension and that anxiety and fear. And so it's amazing that Stanislav is able to see through all of that and just listen to his gut and listen to his instinct and not follow his orders on that night and in some way save the world. He'll never tell you that. He will never say that he saved the world. He'll say he has said that he simply made a decision. That's all. He doesn't think of himself as a hero. He wasn't rewarded. He was disciplined by the Soviet Union. He left the army a few months later and had a nervous breakdown and lived the rest of his life in a farm town on the outskirts of Moscow. But this one soldier who pretty much no one's even heard of his name, arguably single-handedly saved the world. So that's the story of Stanislav Petrov. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it makes you think about maybe following orders isn't the right thing. I don't know. I'm not suggesting anything. Maybe it's not always the right thing. Maybe we should listen to our instincts. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for listening.